Hi, I'm Claudia Christian, and this year during COVID 2020, I wasn't able to give any speeches, but if I had been able to give a speech anywhere, this would have been it. I want to talk to you about what it's like to have your brain hijacked by a compulsive disorder. My brain was hijacked by alcohol. Over the course of about 20 years of drinking, I learned the behavior of wanting, and in the end, needing alcohol in order to be normal. I used to be an alcoholic, addicted to alcohol. I was alcohol dependent. I had an alcohol use disorder. I used to care what you called me, whether the layman's term of alcoholic or the more politically correct medical term AUD. Now, I could care less. I care about action more than words. Fact, about 80 people will die of alcohol-related causes during this talk. So semantics mean very little in comparison to this crisis. I need to say those words out loud as well because they still provoke shame in me. Even after all these years of talking about my addiction and helping other people with their alcohol misuse, my heart still literally dips when I hear the words I've come to dislike so much. Messy, out of it, drunk, sloppy, alcoholic, alky, undisciplined, weak. Those words still hurt a little part of me, even after over a decade of recovery. Words are incredibly powerful, which is why I'm so incredibly grateful to be able to say that I used to be an alcoholic. Used to be. The past. Before. But not now. Thankfully. I used to have a drinking problem. You know, when I was little, I dreamt of being a writer or an actress or a doctor, not an addict, not an alcoholic, not a drunk. I did not dream of having a substance nearly destroy my life and steal away a good decade of it. No, that wasn't the plan. I'm here today because I found a solution for my drinking problem, the little-known or utilized TSM, short for the Sinclair Method, which is targeted use of naltrexone or nalmefene, both opiate antagonists. These medications prevent people from getting reinforcement or reward from alcohol, basically the euphoria that they crave. You take naltrexone an hour before the first drink of the day, nalmefene 2 hours before, every time you drink alcohol, and over the course of a few months, your interest in drinking dissipates and your drinking levels decline. Naltrexone gave me an off button when mine had disappeared, but I could have easily, very easily fallen through the cracks, as so many millions of people are right now. I would venture that the majority of you know at least one person who has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I would then further guess that for the majority of you, it's someone close to you, which makes sense, since about 1 out of 3 adults in countries like the US and UK have an alcohol use disorder. That is a lot of people. For those of you who've never experienced a compulsive disorder of the brain, like addiction, I want to try and paint a picture for you. Let's use sugar for an example. Now, don't get me wrong, sugar addiction can be a debilitating compulsion, but a lot of us say that we're addicted to sugar, even though we're not. We crave it and desire it, yes, but is that truly addiction? Having a late afternoon craving for a sweet is not addiction. Focusing on the dessert menu rather than the appetizers is not an addiction. If you are addicted to sugar, which some people literally are, it would be a mental and physical compulsion. First, you would have to eat sugar 24 hours a day to avoid withdrawal from it. And you'd wake up and eat sugar, and you'd keep sugar on your bedside table so you could eat it throughout the night. You would think about sugar from the time you woke up until the time you went to bed, and you'd probably even dream of sugar. If you were actively using sugar, you would decide where you could go every day by whether or not there was sugar there. You would have a constant supply of sugar everywhere, in your car, your home, your office, your purse, and most likely, you would hide it because it was embarrassing how much sugar you're consuming. If you were trying to abstain from sugar, that would also dictate where you could go because you'd only be comfortable being in places that had no sugar to tempt you. And it would also dictate who you could hang out with based on whether or not they consumed sugar. You would avoid bakeries and supermarkets, restaurants, and movie theaters. You couldn't go to your parents' home because your dad eats cookies and you know where his stash is. You wouldn't be able to get your car washed because they sell candy there at the cash register. You might see where this is going. Sugar's everywhere. So is alcohol. If you're addicted to something, the mental addiction can be as debilitating as the physical addiction. When I was in the height of my disease, and yes, I do use the term disease because it has all the hallmarks of a disease. Alcoholism is progressive and it can kill you, and it's treatable. I couldn't go to a dinner party and focus on conversation because I was too focused on whether or not there was enough wine to go around. Eventually, I learned to bring extra bottles and leave them in my car in case the host ran out. The stress and anxiety of monitoring my drinking so I could appear normal and keeping track of other people's drinking so I could figure out how fast the booze was running out made me completely incapable of being present. I was incapable of engaging in life, friendship, and especially love. Alcohol consumed my thoughts and actions. That is addiction. It is all-consuming. I'm sure you've heard of people gambling away their family home and children's college funds, men and women selling their bodies for a fix, a mother buying vodka instead of food for her baby. These are acts of desperation. These are people so consumed by addiction that nothing matters other than getting the next high or avoiding withdrawal. The more you feed it, the bigger it becomes and the smaller you become until all that's left is a tiny shred of you dying to be heard. Some of us can still hear that voice of reason. I clearly remember myself looking down at myself, buying booze at 7 o'clock in the morning, thinking, what the hell are you doing, Claudia? So a little piece of me was still in there, but others are too far gone to hear the messages from their mind and their body. It is those people I fear for the most. They've lost their essence of self, and that's frightening. Sorry. I didn't know I was going to cry. I'm so sorry. Imagine if you no longer knew who you were or what you were, or even who or what was in control of your body and mind. That is addiction. Losing oneself is the most frightening thing to happen to a person, and addiction is the most talented, wily, and most common thief. In addition to stealing your life force, your creativity, passion, love, health, confidence, looks, relationships, work, and more, addiction also robs you of the one thing human beings crave and need, the love of other human beings. Being an addict usually means that you're left to fend for yourself and that you isolate yourself away from loved ones because you're so filled with shame and self-loathing. You avoid loved ones because you don't want to see the disappointment in their eyes or hear the cruel words, drunk, loser, weak. So you suffer alone or with fellow addicts. Self-acceptance and self-love are imperative for a healthy life. Truly loving yourself is a prerequisite for loving others and for accepting love from others. Happiness begins within yourself and from there extends to those around you. These are things that most of us inherently know, but addiction steals away the ability to perform that one most simple of acts, to love thyself. Some people can get over the guilt and shame of addiction and some cannot. Suicide rates for addicts are substantially higher than for any other group. In the USA, about 120,000 people die of drug and alcohol abuse every year, and about 45,000 die from suicide. the third and 10th leading causes of death in the US, and inherently intertwined. If you're feeling guilty for causing your parents or siblings an incredible amount of stress and worry, maybe even blaming yourself for their cancer, as I did, the thought of ending your life can seem like a punishment you absolutely deserve. Add to that a mind altered by a depressant such as alcohol, and you have a potent mix of danger. Of course, logically, if you killed yourself, you'd be causing your family even more grief, but logic doesn't come into the picture when you're on a downward spiral of substance abuse and self-hate. Addiction is not logical, nor is it reasonable, yet we continue to try to treat it with logic and challenge it with reason. People talk about choice when it comes to addiction. Well, you don't really have to drink, or no one forces you to gamble. But try that logic with a food addict. Yes, people have to eat, but an anorexic would rather die than eat in some cases. Now, that's not logical behavior. A binge eater must eat to survive, but the food is their highly addictive substance. So how can they behave normally around it or try to moderate their consumption when one bite could potentially send them into a binge? Do you tell them not to eat? Once again, addiction is not reasonable nor logical, which is why a person with a compulsive disorder will do the one thing that could potentially kill them or ruin their life. They will continue to crave and use the one substance that can kill them because they are beyond reason. Their brain has changed. They will continue to starve themselves or throw up their food even when their organs are failing because they are beyond reason. Their brain has changed. They will drink mouthwash or hairspray until they bleed internally because they are beyond reason. Their brain has changed. And how do we treat these brain disorders? We try to reason with them by providing talk therapy and fellowship meetings, which can be helpful, don't get me wrong, but, and this is a huge but, we should be offering them science and medication as the first line of defense. In the past decade that I've been working with people who misuse alcohol, I have never met one person, not one, who went to a rehab facility and came out and remained abstinent. Not one. Every single one of them, including me, relapsed after their time in that fake environment, talking our hearts out and being told that we could never touch our substance of choice again or we would die. Not one person got better. In fact, the majority got worse. And this is not funny. Britney Spears or Ben Affleck going in for their 8th round of rehab should not be the fodder of late-night comedians. It is not funny. It is unethical, ineffective, so-called treatment for a deadly disorder of the brain. Would we laugh at someone who had multiple rounds of chemo that were ineffective? Is that funny? The multiple billion-dollar rehab industry is killing people. It is as simple as that. They are charging an exorbitant amount of money for something that simply does not work in the best-case scenario, and something that causes deadly relapses in the worst-case scenario. It is malpractice. It is lawsuit-worthy, but it's simply accepted. Why? Because of the shame and stigma attached to addiction. The multi-billion-dollar rehab industry is preying on the vulnerable and counting on big pharma and the alcohol industry to keep supplying them with clients. No one asks to become addicted to something or compulsive about something. You don't grow up thinking, wow, being physically dependent on ethanol sounds like a hoot. Or gee, throwing up my meals really sounds appealing. But it happens, even to the best of us. The most brilliant, the most sensitive, the most beautiful, intelligent, kind, generous souls, whether good, bad, or indifferent people, addiction does not discriminate. I still recall the first time I overheard somebody referring to me as a drunk. It still punches me in the gut. No matter what you accomplish in life, no matter how good of a person you are, you will always carry the stigma and shame that comes with having been an addict. I've heard loved ones, not strangers, people who loved me, Call me wasted, sloppy, high as a kite, a lush, stupid, ugly, and so on. These are the words that we use for someone who's slowly killing themselves in front of our eyes. These are the words we use for our sons and our daughters, our mothers and our fathers. This is what we call ourselves when we're so helpless and so hopeless that we've even given up on the small part of ourselves that remains trapped in the hell of addiction. We shun even ourselves from disgust and disappointment. I think people turn their heads away in disgust when they see a food addict or an intoxicated person because they're frightened. And that's to be expected. You should be frightened. You should be frightened of a brain disorder that changes you into a person who can and will eat 30,000 calories a day, a person who will drink vanilla extract to avoid withdrawal, a person who will sell their body for a fix. Be frightened, but don't judge. There's a very good chance that you or someone you love could end up facing a compulsive disorder at some point. So you'd be better off being informed, educating yourself as to what actually happens to your brain on alcohol or sugar or drugs, and how you can learn the behavior of addiction. Most important, you can learn how to treat it when it happens. Now there are science-based options. There's medications for cravings, for withdrawal, and medications that literally undo addiction in the brain. Instead of fellowship and prayer, there are doctors willing and able to work with people who want to treat their addiction with science. When I started TSM in 2009, there was one doctor, just one, in the entire country in the USA who was offering it to his patients. Now you can find TSM in every state. Clearly, this is not a fad, and clearly it is desperately needed. I know how difficult it can be to deal with someone who has an addiction, a stranglehold which is adversely affecting their life, but I always stress to people that you must treat this person like the patient that they truly are. You wouldn't yell at or speak down to or belittle someone with diabetes or MS. You wouldn't force an individual with cerebral palsy or cancer to hit rock bottom before you'd help them. So I would hope that you would be loving and compassionate and let them know that you love them unconditionally and that you are concerned for their well-being and that you will help them any way that you can to get better. Support and love and patience and kindness can go a long way in helping an individual to get through the hell of addiction. Family and friends can make a huge and positive difference in their life. I have tremendous hope for the future of addiction treatment. There are incredible options coming out in the next few years using opiate antagonists to control or undo a myriad of addictions, but it will take years of education and spreading the word about science-based treatments for it to truly penetrate the most rural communities and to sway doctors to begin offering their patients these life-saving medications. I hope that you do your part to start the conversation about science-based addiction treatment, because options save lives. And now, more than ever, we need as many options as possible. Now that you have an understanding of what it feels like to have your brain hijacked, I hope that you treat those suffering with compassion and understanding. Thank you.